Joe Biden's handlers are looting the Treasury on the way out. Now, granted, it's very normal for deposed dictators to fly out pallets of cash as they scamper off to Moscow or Dubai or Delaware. In Joe's case, he's in line to push $2 trillion out the door before Trump takes office on January 20th, 800 of which will be deficit. Now, $2 trillion is over 30% of the annual budget, meaning Trump will have to trim spending for the rest of the year just to break even. Now, lower spending mechanically subtracts from reported GDP, which makes Trump look bad. In fact, it could knock almost 2% off GDP growth. Beyond looting the republic to sabotage Trump is what Joe is dumping the money into. You guessed it, donors. Since the election just 8 weeks ago, Biden's announced 4 aid packages for Ukraine, with a 5th in the work. That's for a war that's about to end, indeed, which was a lost cause from the start, but has been fantastically profitable for military contractors who own both parties. Of course, the war is just the start. During Biden's occupation of the White House, he's dumped nearly $8 trillion in subsidies to so-called green energy and semiconductors, many in the so-called Inflation Reduction Act, which was the rebranded Build Back Better Act, which was supposed to be the Great Reset, but as always turned out to be a bag of donor handouts. Now, before the election, Biden's handlers had been doling out the money bit by bit, but once Trump won, they are pretty much dumping it. Just weeks, the administration has dumped nearly $50 billion to 28 climate and chips companies, along with so-called environmental and climate justice grants to 105 community organizers in so-called disadvantaged communities, meaning communities who vote Democrat. Now, one thing Democrats are good at is paying their people with your money. As Zero Hedge puts it, since the election, quote, "we are witnessing a COVID-era spending spree without a pandemic." There's one reason bond yields are surging since the election, which had been worrying financial markets. So bond yields are the interest rate on government debt, and they normally go up when the Fed hikes rates. But when they go up on their own, like now, usually means there's some distress in markets, some reason that investors are worried. That could be general fears of a crash, it could be fears about government insolvency, or it could be because they're dumping out so much spending financed with short-term government debt that markets are having trouble digesting it. Now, in a recent video, I mentioned the $10 trillion wall of debt they're handing Trump, $10 trillion that will have to be financed in the next year thanks to Janet Yellen goosing the economy in time for the election. They're now facing that, thanks to Joe Biden, with an empty pantry. So what's next? Brought to you by Unchained.com. Biden's crew is doing everything they can to make it hard for Trump to enact the tax cuts, spending cuts, and reforms he and Elon have promised. Mainstream media will do Trump no favors. They'll pretend it's all him. The rest of us have to set the record straight. Okay, we'll be watching. See you next time.